Well, when we're talking about, you deal with people's livelihood in terms of where they're living, maybe where they're storing some of their stuff, and that should be a safe place, but where they're living, what is their environment about? That's not a place to get technical about the HVAC or, or how much the faucet that you retrofitted cost. It's about their space, their environment, their well-being, the connection between the space and themselves, I surmise. Well, money's pretty technical, but important and yet very personal, right? So are charts and graphs important? Sure. Are analytics quintessentially important to, everything that I provide? You bet. Is it important that I understand those things? Yes. But launching into all that sort of stuff, and certainly in an initial meeting or even ongoing, can't become an end in itself when we're really talking about, a person, a family, a microeconomy, right? The household economy. And so those dynamics play a huge role in not only how I think and how I try to see things through other people's eyes, but in the casual nature that can be had in exchanging information.
I love it. This is Country Club Conversations. I'm Rajtut, founder and CEO of Storyboard Living. This show gives you actionable insights from the hard-to-reach top percentile in business and entrepreneurship. I think everyone deserves this type of access, and I'm bringing it to you. Welcome to the club. Nir, thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you for inviting me to this conversation, Raj. It's a pleasure.
I wanted to bring you on because I think you're a fascinating character. You are the only finance-related person, and I say finance-related because we'll get into what you do later on in the show,
okay.
Who seems as laid back as you and who seems as authentic as you and also shows up in slippers, I think, everywhere you go, but I've only seen you a handful of times.
Well, winter's coming, so that'll be a costume change.
Sure. You are the founder of Regev Group, which you run with your wife, Sherry.
Correct, yes.
How long have you been running Regev Group?
So I've been independent. I don't remember how long this DBA has been around, but been independent since 1990. So effectively, that's how long we've been around. And Sherry joined forces just before we got married in 1995. And
you've been remote before it was cool to be remote. Is that right?
Well, I don't know that I'm cool now, but we've worked remotely since 2011. And that was a product of circumstances, good circumstances, but we realized that we really don't need an office presence. We cater to client friends in, I think, 20-some states, so it really doesn't matter where they are or we are at any particular time.
Prior to what you're doing today, which, again, we will get into because it's very interesting, who were your parents, your grandparents, or how far back can you go in your family history just so we can get a better sense of who you are?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. It's not really a trick question, but a little bit of a trick answer because circumstantially, I haven't had the opportunity to know much about my family or my predecessors. And my two grandparents died fairly young for health reasons. And so I didn't get to meet them. And two perished in the Holocaust. So there's that. And then my father died when I was 3. So, there aren't a lot of stories, family stories, but we've actually explored that in the last few years and gotten some better insight of some of the folks and even stories about my grandparents through people as far away as Sweden, meaning relatives we didn't know existed. And yet we've come together. So I don't have a lot of direct knowledge, but some knowledge here and there by way of stories.
Your mother must have been a very strong woman to raise yourself, and you have a few siblings as well?
No, actually one sister who was 15 years older than I. So when I moved to this country, she was already married. She was 24, had a husband and a career. So I came here by myself and my mother and my stepfather to be. And she was a strong woman at all. I refer to her as my little 5'0" mother who's full of energy and full of spunk and full of idealism, a lot of idealism. It didn't really serve her all that well, unfortunately. But yeah, she was certainly a strong figure in my life, and I'm very fortunate to have had her.
And was your mother the one that made the decision to relocate to the U.S. from Israel?
She did, as a result of meeting who then would become my stepfather. He lived on a little farm in southern Missouri and happened to work on ships, merchant ships, and found himself docked in Haifa, which is the biggest seaport in Israel. And so they somehow had two mutual acquaintances, and each of them had wanted to introduce them, and they did their thing and loved it, its thing, and that's how I ended up here in the United States.
So you ended up in a small town in Missouri. What were your initial thoughts? Did you have any impressions before coming to the U.S. about what the U.S. would be like? And then did your reality line up with those thoughts, if you had them?
Yeah, no, I actually didn't have any preconceived notions or expectations. And, it was just such a vast unknown. I don't know that I knew much about anything of the world, let alone the United States. Sure, there's television and those types of things, but I don't know as an 8 or 9 year old how much of that I knew or could have used to anticipate what would come. I had no language, so I didn't have English, at the time, and so that didn't leave much room for initial impressions, since I didn't understand really a lot of what's going on, and certainly what was being said. But for a translation here or there, my mother offered me, and of course her language was next to nothing. And my stepfather, may he rest in peace, did the best he could. But it was a suburban environment in Israel. We lived in a little duplex. You said I moved to a small town, which is almost true. Moved to a little farm about 3 miles south of this little town. I think population was 573 or something like that. And Raj, in retrospect, because then I don't know, there was just so much to absorb or try to absorb and learn, notwithstanding the language, but also culturally and so on. But in retrospect, I think it was as much of a more urban or suburban environment with a completely different culture to a completely rural environment with its set of standards and mores and cultural aspects that were, just foreign to me.
How long did it take you to, I guess, mesh with the local culture in school or elsewhere, having, not speaking English, number one, but then also having foreign sounding name? I'm sure you were the only one in your town or close to your town named Nir Regev.
Right. So, there's the aspect of being foreign. There's the aspect of being Jewish. And I sometimes joke or say that my mother and I was half the Jewish population in probably 100, if not 150 mile radius. And, let's not kid around. And I look differently. I look different from most there, or dare I say all. So all those factors played in. And I must say that, the people there in southern Missouri, in that area, were so accepting and so loving in a way, in their own way, a very different way from maybe what we would think of as loving and welcoming. But yeah, there was never, but I also believe that a lot of what we receive is about what we wear on our sleeve, or dare I say, don't wear on our sleeve. When we present ourselves in an open way and an accepting way, then, I think that comes back to us. And that in retrospect, that was my experience there for sure. And I was, I was accepted for sure at a 20th high school reunion. Sherry said, "These people love you." I didn't realize, there was such affection, that y'all had for each other. And I said, "Yeah, and you're right, for each other, because I loved them too." Absolutely. And they became an integral part of my life, and certainly to this day, an integral part of my fabric. And I wouldn't give up that experience or those times for anything. Um, as far as acclimation, I know that my first quarter, and I remember this somewhat distinctly. My first quarter, I remember receiving the report card, and it had all F's. I'm not sure I understood what that meant. It's a pretty letter, but it did have all F's because I didn't understand anything. Even instructions to do math, I knew math at that level, but even the instructions of how to go about that, I just didn't understand. But at my fourth quarter, the end of the year, I had all A's. So I didn't maintain a 4.0 average. Let's just get that out of the way. But be clear about that. But yeah, it was pretty rapid, and I attribute that to being young. I don't know that I was that bright or brilliant, but I think younger kids are resilient in that way, and I think I fit that mold.
My thoughts coming into this, before digging deeper into your story, just based on what I knew from our previous conversations, I thought you'd be someone that carried or had a chip on his shoulder based on the fact that you lost your father at a young age, you didn't know your grandparents, you came to this foreign country where no one looked or sounded like you. But it sounds like your experience was kind of the opposite. And did that play a role into just how warm and welcoming you appear to be today?
Well, I hope it's not a facade. Thank you. Probably, I don't know. I've certainly thought about that. I've considered that, Raj. And I've always viewed life or the history we create as a springboard versus a hammock. It's not a place, where we can, see that something bad had happened or an event impacted our lives and to the negative, and then lean on that or lay back on that, or woe is me about anything of that nature. So many elements of life can offer inspiration, and so often we learn by contrast, right? Contrast is a wonderful poverty, a single mother. The cultural difference into which those deep waters into which I took a dive. Not of my doing. So I didn't choose to do that, right? So there's that aspect. All of those I look back as positive. I mean, certain elements were tough at the time, really tough. But I'd rather have experienced all of it than to not experience even one of those elements that make up my fabric. Yeah. So, and warmth, why not?
That's a good point.
You're right. I mean, why should we not be warm and accepting and connective and collaborative? And yeah, I mean, I'm so mushy about that. It's just a way of being that I can't avoid, I suppose.
So you've always, for the most part, had the personality you have today.
Depends on who you ask.
Sure.
No. I think so. I think I've been on one trajectory, if you will, or I've evolved into who I am. I would say I'm a culmination of the parts that have become as a result of, you fill in the blanks. But I'm an amalgamation of my experiences and the attitudes I've chosen to have, because I think there is a power of choice that's connected with how are we going to view things, both in the rearview mirror and the windshield. So, I'd say so. Yeah.
A part of your life was spent in poverty in your early years. When did you realize or know that maybe you didn't have as much as other people?
Well, it was a fairly impoverished area of southern Missouri in which I grew up. So many people were, existed below the poverty level. But I knew in the back of my mind, there are always little indicators that let me know that we had less than a lot of those who didn't have anything. Laying in bed, watching my breath at night was a good thing, not because we didn't have insulation and it was a little 800 square foot shack with a little potbelly stove. I'm not saying that's altogether great, but in seeing my breath laying on this sort of cot I had in my little room meant that the flat roof would freeze over. And so the drips, the the pots and pans catching the leaky roof would not keep me up as long as the cold did. So,
wow.
yeah. So, you know, um, one time my stepfather, I think I was teen or maybe preteen, and I said, I asked him maybe rhetorically, why do we have to be this poor? Why does this have to be our existence? And he sort of laughed it off and said, "Oh, we're not poor." We think he had, again, in retrospect, we're not diagnosticians, but we think he had Asperger's, and that led to his being really apathetic about most anything, including, money or earning or subsistence. And so he said, "Oh, we're not poor." And he just kind of laughed it off, and somehow got a hold of their tax return. And I took it to the school counselor, or whomever was to be contacted. And I gave her that. And in turn, she filled out the form to allow me to have free lunch, state funded lunch, however that works. I really don't know or remember. And I got that little card that gave me free lunches. And I brought that home from school, and I tossed it down on our little kitchen table. And I said, "Looky here." And he kind of laughed. He said, "Well, what's that?" I said, "That's proof that we're poor."
And you said you were a preteen or a teen at this time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was probably 11 or 12 or something, maybe.
So you've always been pretty bright.
I don't know. I like for my comments or statements to be based in reality and facts. So maybe that goes back that far.
Sure.
Yeah.
And was that around the time that you got your first job, or was that later on?
Oh, I worked for farmers, adjacent farmers, building fence, hauling hay, bucking bales, that sort of thing. And I remember, for as long as I remember in my childhood here, or my youth here in the States, I always did that, and didn't have a formal job, if you will, until I was 16, had my driver's license, and could drive to West Plains, Missouri, about 25 miles away, and got my burger flipping job at McDonald's. So,
and after McDonald's, it was a community bank, correct?
Well, that was post graduating from high school. I was in a little band in high school for just a little while. During such time, their drummer was jailed, so they had a set of drums, which I didn't, but I knew how to play the drums. So I did that for a little bit. What else? I had a DJ business, a portable sound and light show. That was from 16 through 18. Actually, was the entertainment for my own prom. So that was for what it was. It was fairly successful at the time, and a good bit of fun and a whole lot of work, but only when I graduated from high school did I have the first banking job.
What was your going rate for a gig as a DJ?
Began at $400 for the evening.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was that was some good cash.
Yeah, that was real money then.
That was real money. Well, and I like cars. I like going on dates. I like certain things which required money, and so I always was able to fund those things that I enjoyed. Yeah, $400. And I figured out somewhat quickly that if a particular school or organization wants 2 mirror balls versus 1 mirror ball, then that's a little bit of an extra cost. And, I had a little bit of a menu of a variety of add-ons that they could have. So maybe upwards of $700 or $800 for an evening of DJing. And that was.
Did that spark your entrepreneurial drive, or just open your mind up to the possibilities of entrepreneurship?
I'd say both.
Okay.
I'd say both for sure, because I couldn't imagine that this would happen. I just imagined wanting to make it happen, if that makes sense. And then it did happen, and then it grew, and then, the word got out, and, little schools and their little dances and even private parties and so on. And, it inspired me. I liked it. Having money versus not having money proved to be a good thing. And, so I think it also taught me that doing what Mama taught us, right? Doing the right thing for the right reasons, treating people well, doing what you say, showing up on time, all those things that, seem basic, but maybe less so nowadays. But I think, again, it offered an entree or an inspiration for what was to come.
One thing that I truly love about the US is that I feel like if you're an entrepreneur truly adding value for your customers, you will be rewarded. It may not be overnight, but I feel like at some point you will be rewarded. And it sounds like that's exactly the way it worked out for you with your first business as a teenager.
Yeah, no, it did. And until today, sometimes I think or reflect on something that happened in the last couple of days or couple of months or a new client relationship. And I think, from whence did this come? Or how could this happen? Or what did I do? And then I realized, it's really the result of what I've been doing for the last 30, 40 years or more, to, I think, your point.
Yeah, the first time we met, you were very generous with making an introduction or offering up an introduction to someone else. And that is the type of thing where you're planting a seed maybe without knowing it, and is going to cause someone like me to come back to you because Nir, out of his own generosity, did a favor for me. And I'm sure that's helped you a lot in your career and in your business.
I think so. And back to another question you had earlier, and I'll ask it of myself, did I realize this was happening when it was happening or all along? And the answer is no. And the answer is also of the why not? Why not? Why would, if you said something that sparked an idea about someone who may be able to help you, or maybe there could be a symbiotic or mutually beneficial relationship, why wouldn't I make that suggestion? Why wouldn't I do whatever it takes to maybe put you all together? So, and I guess attitudinally, I've always been of that, not deliberately, but by nature, I suppose.
To me, you seem like the definition of a giver versus someone who's transactional or maybe a taker. Do you think that has held you back at all in the world that you play in? My stereotype of someone in your world is maybe more of a taker or someone who's more transactional and less laid back, let's say. Do you think that's held you back at all or only propelled your career?
Maybe both. Maybe both. I could argue probably both points that you made, Raj. Has it held me back? I'm not, and my family will tell you, we'll play a game or Rummy Cube or something. I'm not competitive at all. I tend to not care about getting ahead of you or winning a race. And I did hear a saying one time that if life were a race, then the first one to the finish line loses, right? So
that's a great point.
so yeah, I've been ambitious, I think, and I've certainly wanted, but even wanting what I couldn't imagine in yesteryear wasn't, people say, well, you should set goals and do all this stuff. And I've never really done that either. Because and I'm thankful that I haven't, because had I reached those goals, I wouldn't be where I am. And I mean that by way of business, but also, personal and relationships and family for sure. I'd like to think that I've given, and certainly more than I've taken. I've had that attitude. Maybe I could have gone further and not thinking about, those things, but maybe I sleep better. Maybe I feel better about what I do, how we do things now more so than I would otherwise.
A couple of years after high school, your giver personality showed when you were a volunteer firefighter. I think you were doing that at the same time as working at a community bank, if I'm not mistaken.
No.
And the community bank that you worked at, was that your first foray into the world of finance?
I would say so, but it was really dipping the toes in the water. I really thought that working at that bank would give me gains, but also help people financially. I would have the opportunity to help people financially. And that was really an exciting notion for me. But within 3 years, and I only worked there for 3 years or thereabouts, I realized that the value I'm adding is really not what I had hoped it might be. But still, money, finances, how the bank invests its money a little bit. I got a little bit of a feel for that. And coincidentally, concurrently, I also volunteered with fire department, and I did want to give back, but frankly, that wasn't my idea. My folks' house burned down, which is a whole nother story. But and that was the Birch Tree Fire Department. I ended up living in Mountain View, Missouri, but and volunteered there. But those guys, those volunteer firemen, were so wonderful and so wanting to do anything or everything that they could, and they couldn't really. It was a lost cause, but they broke out a couple of windows and came into the house and saved all of our family albums, all the photos,
Wow.
all the anything that really, not that we had much of anything that was, diamonds and jewelry and such. We didn't really have possessions, but the most important possessions, the most valuable possessions, they understood that, and they grabbed all those things and they put them in their pickup trucks. It was snowing that day, and made sure that those are. I mean, they had some smoke damage, but they preserved all that, and if you will, they preserved a part of my family's history, is what they did in that day. And how does one pay back? How does one give back in a situation or scenario like that? And I thought, well, I probably won't accomplish anything or do anything as great as they did that day, but at least I can give of myself in the way that they give of themselves. So
for them to have the foresight to think like that under intense pressure is incredible and
phenomenal.
I can't imagine how thankful your family was to have those albums saved. So you were doing the volunteer firefighting while you were also going to school, or was this prior to you majoring in economics?
Oh, that was during the Mountain View bank era of my life, and then I moved to Columbia and started school and had part-time jobs, but no time for volunteer firefighting.
Sure. Yeah. So you majored in economics and you went to Mizzou?
I went to Mizzou for a couple of years and was pre-business, but was really turned on by a couple of mandated economics required. Not mandated, they're requirements, right? Required economics classes, I guess micro and macro. Really turned on by that because I thought, the field of economics teaches so much about our behavior, our financial behavior, and whether it's personal economics or household economics in a micro sense to, world history has changed and changes because of economics. And so what are the so often? And so how does that backdrop look? How has it affected world events, world history? So, that just really intrigued me. And so to answer your question, I went for 2 years at Mizzou. I really liked at the time and still really like Springfield, Missouri as a really, 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 really large, call it huge town. I think or at least it was at the time. That's kind of pre-Branson era. But so I thought, I want to live there. And so I moved there and finished my last 2 years at SMSU, or Missouri State as we know it now.
I agree with you. I think Springfield has a lot going for it. If I'm not mistaken, I think the O'Reilly family is from there, O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Yeah.
And Bass Pro is from Springfield as well.
Johnny
right?
Morris is, yeah.
That's a lot of talent to come out of a small or large town, as you put it.
Yeah. Both of those were just in the embryonic stages of their existence, and after some time and moving to St. Louis County, then I realized, oh goodness, O'Reilly Automotive is, nationwide.
Right.
I didn't really, forest in the trees in Springfield while I was there. And I knew Bass Pro was getting pretty big, but they both spawned there.
Did you go straight from Springfield to St. Louis?
I did.
And that was your first time living in St. Louis, but was it your first time even visiting St. Louis when you moved here?
No, I'd visited St. Louis on occasion. We'd come from the farm to pick up, say, my sister and brother-in-law who'd fly into St. Louis. So can't say that I saw much of, the city or the county, but, I certainly knew of it. And then I had a couple of friends in college at Mizzou who were from here and invited me to, come spend the weekend with their parents or such. So that, I had a little bit of exposure, but didn't know it like we know it now.
And what job brought you to St. Louis?
So I was independent at that point. So out of university, I went to work for Merrill Lynch for a couple of years. I think back and smile that, because I think I learned everything I could have possibly learned about what I did not want to do professionally. Yes, I wanted to serve people's financial needs in particular ways, but not in that sort of way or not on that path. And no disrespect to Merrill Lynch or any other brokerage house or wirehouse. So I went independent in Springfield. So 2 years of finishing college, 2 years at Merrill Lynch, and then I spent another couple of years just as an independent representative, if you will, registered securities representative officially, and then decided to move. I decided to move to St. Louis or the St. Louis area. Nothing else was compelling other than, really, I thought, well, at some point, I'm probably going to have. I hope to have children, and I wanted them to have exposure like I didn't have growing up, whether it's knowing Rembrandt from Van Gogh or Mozart from Schubert or the Cardinals from the Blues. I just wanted them at least to have access to that or all those things that a bigger metropolitan area, certainly the St. Louis area, offers. So that was a reason for picking up and moving.
For someone who's not in your world, when you say you went independent and you say, you were selling or representing clients in acquiring registered securities, what exactly does that mean for someone who's not in your world? Like what product or service were you selling, and how did that kind of evolve and differ in the early years?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So when I say independent, that means I'm not employed by, I mentioned Merrill Lynch before, but it could be UBS or any other financial institution, and I come into their office and I have their logo on my card. Now, there are broker dealers. Now, these I mentioned are also broker dealers, but there are broker dealers that serve a purpose primarily for compliance and due diligence in my world. And they provide all those needs that I have for such an institution. So I'm independent. I can sort of do whatever I want on the one hand, but certainly within the confines of compliance and regulation and all those things that they oversee and help me help make sure are all in line and as they should be. I wanted to go independent because rather than having a certain track or a certain bushel basket of financial instruments, investments, if you will, to offer people, I could go out beyond the mainstream, the mutual funds, the stocks and bonds and all those things that we know about by way of conventional houses. Because I wondered, Raj, is there more? Is there more? What else might there be? What do institutions do? The insurance companies, the foundations, the pension funds, they seem to do well, if not better than individual investors at times. And why do they do that? Is it because of their size? Is it because they're so smart? And I realized, it took a few years to realize that they have access, they gain access to areas that we don't. And namely, I will say private equity, private debt. A lot comes from real estate, investment real estate, various food groups there. And I thought, gosh, can I offer that? Is that possible? And the answer is a resounding yes. Now it takes an understanding of these instruments. It takes, it took a number of years to really evolve that or bring that into being an integral part of what we do today. And it just takes experience and knowledge, maybe like so many things, to develop an expertise. And I think hopefully I've done that over the years. And so that's in large part what maybe differentiates me as an independent.
When you mention figuring out what products or services can be offered to independent clients that some of the larger groups might have access to, I feel like that very much is the building block or the starting point for what Regev Group is today. So how did you exactly go about figuring that out? you're obviously very smart, and I'm sure one way or another you got from point A to B. But do you recall what helped you do that? And the reason why I'm asking is I'm hoping to get some sort of actionable insight that maybe somebody listening to this show might be able to use in their own life or business.
Yeah. So I think it kind of maybe boils down to that deep desire to help people. And that help can mean so many different things when it comes to the financial services industry or the products that are made available. And the bigger the wealth, the more layers there are in terms of complexity and needs, the more niche-y some of the solutions become. And I realized certainly there's a need and a demand for that. And I really need to be good at identify those needs, understand those needs, and then find solutions, sometimes creative solutions. It's also quintessentially important to me to have the people around me, because as I am independent, I am on my own. Sherry, I do the advising portion of things. She does everything administrative and operational. I affectionately call us the 2-horse stable, and she does all those things really well. But really, as part of this independent broker dealer, my affiliation, they're really, really smart people, good people, very good people, caring people. And it may seem as though I'm suggesting they care about me, which they do. I know wholeheartedly that they do, but ultimately they care about the end user, our client friends. And so they work really hard on finding good, no guarantees that anything will succeed. There always hits and always misses, right? When it comes to most anything in life, but certainly investing and risks involved. But they're really good at assembling a menu from which I can choose or I can present. And so I would say a lot of the success has come from talking to these good folks today, but folks along the way who've helped me understand and gain access to various areas, and certainly knowledge and education.
This episode is brought to you by Storyboard Living. We're actively buying apartment communities in the St. Louis region, Southern Illinois, and Southern Missouri. We make transactions easy, and we've never gone under contract on an acquisition that we didn't close. We also offer a finder's fee and broker's bonus for off-market deals. If you have a property that may be a good fit for us, email deals@storyboardliving.com. That's deals@storyboardliving.com. Would you say that not being shy about asking for advice or not being afraid of looking stupid asking a question helped you in figuring all that out?
Very much so. And that was one of the compelling reasons that I wanted to get away from, a big organization where there's almost an unspoken rule that's said I must show up in the morning and answer the phone calls and have all the, be that hero riding in on the white horse with all the right answers. And only when I went independent did I start embracing the power of saying, I don't know, or I've never heard of this before, or, I'm not sure, or I need to double check. We just mentioned prior to going on air here, trust but verify, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll second guess myself any day, at any time. And unlike I actually have a family member who can't stand not knowing something or the perception of not knowing something. Can't stand it. He just will avoid that at any cost. And, I think I'm the flip side of the coin. I celebrate it. I love an opportunity of not knowing something or not, in a moment's notice, knowing how to solve a particular problem or how it can be solved or if it can be solved. I love those challenges. I love those opportunities. So, I don't know, has been a huge, powerful part of my growing up, if you will. I'm not saying I've grown up, but but it's been a good thing.
On that same topic, I'm going to say that I had never heard of a DST until we met. And even today, I feel like I don't fully understand what a DST is. And my understanding is that you focus the majority of your business on placing funds into various DSTs. Can you shed some light on that? And am I right in saying that?
Yeah, no, that's actually not true. It is true in terms of as far as the context of our conversation has gone, because I think that's why we initially, if I remember right, that's why we initially were introduced. So I launched, sort of delved into that, and that's what I do. Not to take anything away from the fact that it is a significant part of my business, and I love it a lot because it's a real niche solution. And I'm going to back off of DSTs, Delaware Statutory Trusts, because they are by their nature an accredited only investment. And an accredited only investment cannot be, and this is a technical term, they cannot be generally solicited. So I just can't freely talk about their structure or how they fit in particular situations, but to say that for people, and by people I mean accredited investors who are seeking solutions, tax favored solutions, by way of 1031 exchange in coming out of their properties. They no longer want to directly own a property, but want to take advantage of the tax law, what's available to them by way of tax deferral. Let's just say I have solutions that can fit in particular situations really, really well.
I'll give you my understanding of a DST, and you can blink twice if I'm right, or just tell me to stop if we're going off track.
Sure.
My understanding is if I own a commercial real estate asset, I sell that asset and I don't want to 1031 exchange it to another asset, either because I can't identify it or because I don't want to have that management or direct ownership risk in the future. I can take those funds and place them into a Delaware Statutory Trust. And that trust, whoever is administering that trust, will place those funds into various real estate projects, which will act as a 1031, but without your direct control over those assets. So if the deals go well, you're still collecting income, you still retain ownership, but you don't have that same headache you would have if you were directly controlling and owning commercial real estate.
No, that's good. I just blinked twice. Yeah, no, that's that's very good. I'll just jump to a little bit of word usage. You said that the DST or the property or properties would act as a 1031. Really, they allow you to take advantage of 1031, because 1031, and I want to make that distinction for the listeners, because 1031 is a process, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can take advantage of, and by the way, I'm not giving legal nor tax advice, and there's my disclaimer there. But as I understand it, by way of a QI, a qualified third-party intermediary, or a facilitator, sometimes they're called, that process takes place where you relinquish a property, you sell a property or properties, and then you reinvest into replacement property or properties or DSTs. Okay, so DSTs will own and operate properties. They're generally not a tool that's sought in the event that something can't be found. Okay, I want to go to that for a second, because in a normal circumstances, as I've seen them, it isn't the case that someone says, "Oh my gosh, I'm in my 43rd day of my 45-day identification period," and we don't need to get into that. It's just a technicality with which we're familiar. It's a part of the rule, part of the code, 1031. Which requires that. So it's not someone who's sort of waking up in that 43rd day, I say that, to go to the extreme and saying, wow, I couldn't find anything that I could own and operate myself. Nothing is fitting this space I'm seeking. Well, I'll just go the route of DSTs. Normally, again, as I've seen it, it's the case of someone who's done, and I call it the done factor. I know that doesn't sound very fancy, but they're just finished with that property or their properties for whatever the reasons. whatever the reasons. And that could be, they're getting a little older. Maybe they inherited the property and don't want to mess with it anymore. Maybe, in at least one instance, some folks were sitting on some money and they bought a bunch of properties during the Great Recession because they thought, well, maybe some of these rental houses couldn't go down much further than they have. And so they rode that back up, did really well, and then realized a decade later, gosh, we didn't want these rental houses in the first place. So
Good problem to have.
Yeah, right. We don't want them now, but what do we do? Because the good news is everything went the way they sort of anticipated or wanted. The bad news is everything sort of went the way they wanted. And they have this, tax monster on their hands. So, that's where these solutions can come in for accredited investors. And also, I'll just give honorable mention to opportunity zone funds. We hear about opportunity zones, and they apply to real estate as well for accredited investors. But also, it could be an art collection, or it could be a business. Anything that has pent up capital gains, meaning the gains themselves or recapture. We don't need to get into all those things, but if optimization of a back-end strategy is sought, then these instruments I make available.
What else does your company offer to potential clients? I thought it was mainly the DSTs, so I apologize.
No, that's fine.
What else are you guys focused on? Or if you can, I don't know that you can, but if you can, maybe even provide like what your gold standard may look like for a business person or high income earner, if you were to provide them with some sort of financial plan or strategy.
Yeah, and just to jump to a product, you said high income earner, so I don't want to forget that. There are some solutions that we make available. One in particular comes to mind for high income earners who want to diversify in various ways and have a tax break, a unique tax break by way of these certain investments. So, and again, that's for accredited investors only, these types of techniques. I don't know that there's a gold standard, if you will, because we don't have minimums. A lot of folks in my industry will create minimums, a minimum investable asset base. And we don't do that because we just feel strongly that various people in various stages and places in their lives can take advantage of what we offer, and we can serve them and still even have some of these alternative investments and have a more direct ownership in real estate. And by that, I mean not involving Wall Street or some traded instrument like a traded REIT, if you will. So a good example of that might be a non-traded REIT. And those are available to non-accredited investors and can be a nice fitting way to own an asset or a little set of assets which diversify, are not at the whims of Wall Street with those volatilities. Certainly they have their own set of risks, which are disclosed and discussed and on the front end. But when fitting, that could be meaningful, if not powerful, to have as part of the array for any investor. Let's go to Wall Street for a second and some of the traded securities. I, actually somewhat recently have added an ability, and I won't go into the details of that, but added the ability to provide institutional class investing into equities, and bonds and other debt instruments as well. But rather than just picking EFTs or just going to a mutual fund family or something of that sort, there's a whole little team that provides and creates products that are very much like institutions utilize. And there's even a way for me to look at an account statement or have them look at it. Actually, I just gather the statement. They're the smart ones. And they do an analysis, a really in-depth analysis of what this portfolio is and what it's not. And I think it's always been surprising, either small or big surprise, to see what accounts or portfolios actually have in them or how they're comprised relative to how that account's owner thinks it is comprised. And sometimes there's a big disparity there. So or finding that can lead to, well, how do we clean this up? How can we make this match more of what may be fitting for you or what you thought you had in the first place? So that's a good bit of fun and still, markets based. So we offer all of that in addition to the alternative investments. And again, the alternative investments, yes, the DSTs are really a subset of the real estate portion of the alternatives we offer, which are a lot come from investment real estate or commercial real estate, but also, like I said before, private equity and private debt.
I love that the theme of you being a giver is still showing today, making the investments accessible to everyone, not just high-income earners or accredited investors. I think is awesome. So for us as a company, we would love to have non-accredited investors in our deals in the future. We're starting to toy with the idea of allowing accredited investors into our investments, apartment acquisitions, but there's too much risk involved for us at the size we are at today, maybe in the future. Did it take you some time before you started to bring in or allow for non-accredited investors to take advantage of some of your offerings, or was that the goal and the idea from the start?
Goal and the idea from the start, and it's actually a backwards. I don't know how to say that. Almost the antithesis of what you presented, Raj, is actually what happened. In other words, these instruments were available to me to make available to people. So it wasn't the case that I was seeking those out, but rather, again, the smart people, the due diligence people were making those available. We're looking at those very, very carefully and approving them. We call it an approval process, and it's actually quite rigorous. Actually, my broker-dealer's approval process is somewhat known in the industry for being some of the more rigorous, or one of the more rigorous, if not the most rigorous processes in the industry. And I like that. I love that because, again, smarter people than I am look at this stuff, discern what is it not, way before I have a chance to look at it, way before they approve it. They really kick the tires. They get to know the companies. And so that array is available to me. And my part is, you say giving. To me, it's quite simple. Again, why wouldn't I, if I have this available to me, why wouldn't I present it to folks, accredited or non-accredited, depending on the fit?
That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned the 2-horse stable.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your business, like the way it developed over the years. I know you have 2 children, adult children today, twins.
Twins, yeah.
Did they factor into your decision to build what I think, and I could be wrong, but what I think is a lifestyle business, keeping the headcount low and tailoring the business, I think, to fit the type of life you want to live? That's the impression that I got from you.
I'm a little surprised by that, not because of your insight, but because I guess I gave enough for you to pick up on that. It's very, very true.
The slippers gave it away.
Well, yeah, I like comfort. And look, there's all this talk. I guess it's been around for a while. This whole work-life balance stuff that we hear about, we talk about, we discuss, and I'm not taking anything away from it. I'm not throwing that out there in any kind of a disparaging way, but rather, it's terminology that's used, and I think it's just, people talk about it and how to accomplish it and so forth. To me, it's really, a lot of that stuff is so darn simple, right? If there's love and respect, and that's one of the things I told the twins when they were, I think my son asked, kind of what's the meaning of life? He was like 7 or 8 or something like that. And I thought, well, I better make this good. Really, so much boils down to love and respect, and those come in different, in different shapes and sizes and depths and emotions. But, you can really, really like your sofa, maybe love it. You respect it, which means you don't put your feet on, your shoes on. Maybe some people do, but we don't, because we love and respect that. it's an object. So at that level, we love and respect. What I do for a living, gosh, so much love in what I do, but a deep respect. I already talked about the folks at the broker dealer, whom I respect a lot for their care and their knowledge. The people whom we serve, our client friends, respect a lot. Have to, and if there's someone can't respect, then we probably can't do business together. But but also family and love, and my wife, my children. There's that ultimate love and respect there, right? And so to combine all those things, again, it's I don't know how this became thematic, but why not? Why not? And you're absolutely right in that the children probably drove us to be, what did you say, cool or innovators or something about working remotely?
Yeah, you were doing it before it was cool.
Yeah, it was cool. Well, and maybe as a result of having not had a father of my own, I don't know. I wanted to be with my children. I wanted to, what's the adage? Well, he was always at the high school play, or whatever is said in our society.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to be there. I had to, anything from changing diapers to being at that school thing, or and just spending time. And with technology, we can do that, not just during the COVID era and so on, but early on. I mean, for a while we carried it while Sherry was pregnant. We had a pager because we'd forward our phone, our office phone, when we had an office presence, to the pager, and it would alert us that there's a voicemail, and we'd call in for the voicemail. And I'm probably making things sound like I'm talking about a cassette tape to certain people maybe listening, but those days are gone. But they weren't that long ago that we had those days, and it was scary to go into that. And our biggest fear was that people will feel that like there's not that live person who's answering, which, by the way, nowadays with our working remotely can happen not only in our homes, which are here in Missouri and in Montana, but anywhere in the world. We can literally answer, but for time zone differences, maybe we can answer our business line, anytime. That voicemail, comes to us, by way of a voice file and an email, both to Sherry and me, immediately, no matter where we are in the world, and we can tap into that as soon as we can and return a call. So I don't mean go into all those simple technical aspects of our business, but really it was the children that began all that, and the trust in electronics and the knowledge that we'll make ourselves available, even if we're not sitting behind a desk somewhere for 8 hours a day. We're still we became able to provide, what we call excellence in service and all else, maybe as well, if not better, than someone who's sitting behind a desk for 8 hours.
That's awesome. I love it. Did your growing up in a small town kind of lead you to Town and Country, which is where I believe you stay when you're in St. Louis and Montana, like just having that wilderness or wanting to maybe not be in a dense urban area?
Yeah, certainly I lean toward being outside or at least seeing outside and enjoying the outdoors more so than I will. That doesn't mean I can't, we have our season tickets at the Fox, and there's a lot of city stuff, or more metropolitan, if you will, aspects of living and existing that I enjoy and we enjoy. But if I can be outside, that's a good thing. So I think that did take us to Town and Country, because our setting there is, it's right off of Manchester, but at the same time, sort of in the middle of nowhere, and staring at a lake or a mountain or both in Montana is a good thing for me.
I've never been to Montana, so I can't speak on that. But Town and Country to me is extremely unique in the sense that you really feel like you're in the middle of nowhere, like you said, but you're in the middle of everything. In your experience, is there any other suburb in the U.S. that compares to Town and Country, or is there a good comp that maybe I can look up just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I don't know because I don't know various areas in the United States, but in looking for a particular setting in the greater St. Louis area, and we actually moved from Wildwood, and we're on 4 acres in the middle of the woods there, with a well and a septic tank. Not much by way of utilities. We had electricity and telephone is really all we that was served there. And we really didn't want to leave that as much as we wanted certain other aspects of, that was the time we went away from having an office and needing some office space inside the house. But what we discovered in that journey, if you will, is that there are pockets. Town and Country is not unique in having pockets here in the greater St. Louis area, which offer just about what anybody, I think pretty much what anybody may want. Actually, we're at a good friend's house in Sunset Hills, and they're off of, what are they, off of Watson, and they are absolutely in the middle of the woods, middle of nowhere, and yet in the middle of everywhere. It's kind of the same as you awesome. Described ours. And we also, here we ended up being in a Frank Lloyd Wright inspired house, which has, and if you know anything about him as an architect, he wanted to bring the outside in and the inside out. So a big part of our living, when we are staying here, living here in this home, for the most part, we're outside while we're inside, if that makes sense.
I feel like your answer to my next question is going to maybe be spend more time outdoors, but I'll ask it anyways. Do you have what we're calling a hole-in-one, which is just your number one tip or piece of advice for someone to implement in their life or keep in mind in their day-to-day? Is there something that you think would move the needle for someone listening today?
Well, what they say in grade school as we're growing up, everybody's different. So the hole-in-one for someone could be markedly different from what's good for you or maybe good for me. Yeah, I think the outdoors, the world in which we live, I think that nurtures our soul. It does mine. Breathe the air, smell the air, hike that mountain, feel the sweat, whatever it is, or maybe it's cold and it's the opposite of sweating. I really think that stuff, and I'm not saying, be that poster child for the outdoor store, and commit yourself to being outdoors. But I think it matters. They put these green spaces, on top of multi-story buildings on top, and I'm glad that they do. There's a reason for that, and I think it nurtures a soul, but connects us. So, if you and I were having this conversation, well, I don't know that we'd have this conversation, but if we're having a conversation outside of this studio or this building, we feel different. We would just feel different. We might feel differently about each other. And I'm not even saying better, but certainly differently. So I don't know. I don't know if that's the ace in the hole, but that's what I have. And if there's somewhere else you want to go vis-a-vis relationships. I appreciate that.
If there is anything else you'd like to mention, I'm sure I would appreciate it. And I'm sure others would appreciate learning more about the way you think about life or business. So if there is anything, feel free. But I'll say personally, I'm going to go for a walk this evening based on your advice.
Oh, good. Not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. I might add, I don't know if this is a tie-in, but you've mentioned maybe a couple of times now the casual nature. That doesn't take away from the serious nature of serious topics or serious matters or conversations or the gamut of financial matters or business matters or family matters. But I think so often, so many take themselves maybe too seriously. Certainly people in my arena, the financial services industry, maybe yours as well, Raj, need to put on an air or seem maybe a little smarter than they are. And I'm not going to say hubris comes in, but, maybe a little bit of an ego comes in versus, a humility that maybe most people, if not everybody, enjoys. If we just talk eye to eye and not have externalities come in to flavor the conversation. I think, and the people with whom we work, the people I serve, there's an intimidation. Oh, Nir's the smart financial guy, or he knows more than I do, or, all those things that may not be true. And to the extent that they may be true, really don't matter. And what's the old saying? I like old sayings. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
That's a good one.
Right.
I've actually never heard that.
Yeah. Well, I'm infinitely older than you are. So, no, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. When it comes to, certain things, I mean, the spine surgeon who worked on me several years ago, I probably wanted to know more about what he knows and how much he cares, but, certain technical things like that. But, when we're talking about, you deal with people's livelihood in terms of where they're living, maybe where they're storing some of their stuff, and that should be a safe place, but where they're living, what is their environment about? That's not a place to get technical about the HVAC or, or how much the faucet that you retrofitted cost. It's about their space, their environment, their well-being, the connection between the space and themselves. I surmise. Well, money's pretty technical, but important and yet very personal, right? So are charts and graphs important? Sure. Are analytics quintessentially important to everything that I provide? You bet. Is it important that I understand those things? Yes, but launching into all that sort of stuff, and certainly in an initial meeting or even ongoing, can't become an end in itself when we're really talking about a person, a family, a microeconomy, right? The household economy, and so those dynamics play a huge role in not only how I think and how I try to see things through other people's eyes, but in the casual nature, that can be had in exchanging information.
I love it. I could sit here and chat for another hour, but I think it's time to wrap it up. I want to be respectful of your time. I know you're a busy guy, and I appreciate you rescheduling, by the way. That was another instance of you being Nir.
Thank you.
So Nir, appreciate your time. Appreciate you being on the show. How can people reach you or learn more about Regev Group?
I thank you as well, Raj. And my hope is that maybe we will hear from some folks who may have an interest, or maybe there was something sparked in what I said or what we said, to begin a conversation. And it's often the case that there's just one question that leads to an answer, which ultimately leads to a meaningful relationship. So that's great. But as much, if not more so, I really do wish or hope that this provides you even more credibility on top of the credibility you've already earned and built for yourself. So if this helps you in any way, then certainly that's what I want.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's mutual. How can they reach me? Their email, phone number. I mean, do you want me to?
Whatever you're good with. I don't know if you want people calling your cell phone. So if your email, website, whatever works for you.
Yeah, regevgroup.com is the website, and there's contact information there. But Nir at regevgroup.com, that's NIR at REGEVGROUP.com is another way. Our phone number, which chases us all over the world, it is 636-386-3300, and then option 1. I remind people to push option 1, because if they don't push option 1, they won't get through. I'm findable.
Awesome. Thanks again, Nir. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Great thing.
If you're a high quality company interested in reaching the high performing audience of Country Club Conversations, let's see how we can work together. To explore sponsorship opportunities, email advertising@storyboardliving.com. That's advertising@storyboardliving.com.